As we all know, FSU is a public university, and because of that, excuse me, because of that, the money that goes to fund the college in general is paid for by state tax dollars. Because of the recession, FSU, along with other state-funded organizations and departments, has recently had to deal with huge budget cuts. Both as a student and a full-time employee at FSU, I've been directly affected by these budget cuts, as 3% of my paycheck is now required to go to my previously state-paid retirement. And we will all have a 15% increase in tuition. Now, if any of you in this room rely on federal or FSU or state grant monies to pay for your education, which many of us do, you will now be required to take a drug test. And most of you are probably freaking out right now. But the logic behind it would be that state tax dollars go to paying for education. So in order to make sure that this money is not wasted, or that we are getting our money's worth and getting what we're paying for, as far as you contributing to society in the future, we want to make sure that the money we're giving is not being spent on drugs. Now, although this fictitious scenario, or the logic applied to this fictitious scenario, is being applied in reality to all welfare recipients. Governor Scott has initially issued an executive order and has recently passed state legislation that requires all welfare recipients to be subject to drug tests. In light of this controversial legislation, I hope to give the reasons why Scott implemented this policy and the ideas behind it, the facts that don't support the ideas behind it, how this policy is unconstitutional and a violation of our Fourth Amendment rights, as well as the potentially disastrous future repercussions on our future generations. I get wicked dry mouth up here, sorry. First, let's discuss the importance of this issue and why it's worthy of public attention. Many of you may wonder why this is important. I have never been or never plan to be on federal assistance of any kind. However, what few people realize is that often those circumstances are entirely out of your control. I'm sure many of you either have been personally affected or know somebody that has been personally affected by the recession, as far as losing a job or not being able to find employment or losing a business. Now, consider a single mother. She has no college education, she has recently lost her job, and has no immediate job opportunities. She is, in essence, forced to apply for public assistance in order to feed herself and provide shelter for her and her children. In applying for public assistance, she is required to fill out necessary documentation, provide necessary documentation, and sit through hours of interviews and follow-up interviews, and upon approval is now told that she has to pay $45 to pee in a cup to prove that she is innocent of illegal drug use. So not only is she a victim of her circumstances, but now she is considered, or now she has to prove that she is not a criminal. Many people would argue that if private sector employees are subject to drug tests, then why shouldn't she be subject to drug tests, since she won't be contributing to the funds that would be going to support her by taxpayers? However, there's two very distinct principles that negate that logic. First of all, the policy itself acts as a type of socioeconomic discrimination and reduces the lower income members of our society to social deviance. It is a violation of our Fourth Amendment rights against illegal search and seizure, as well as ensuring our privacy as citizens and due process of law. In essence, what this means is the illegal search and seizure basically under the assumption that because of her circumstances she is a criminal, or the single mother is a criminal, whoever is applying, and she is automatically suspected, so there is no probable cause, which denies her right to due process of law, and the privacy of not only having to participate in the drug test, but the privacy of the results is questioned. So personally, someone's financial situation does not provide probable cause for criminal behavior. According to Judith Wagner Dessue in her article, Drug Testing, Balancing Privacy and Public Safety, she states that the first two cases on drug testing to reach the Supreme Court were argued in 1988. The court held that urine tests are a significant intrusion into a fundamentally private domain. Since then, every court that has addressed the issue has found that urinalysis and blood tests intrude on privacy. According to Dessue, protection against warrantless and unreasonable searches does not apply in the private sector, which goes back to the argument that of fairness between private sector and public sector drug testing. However, the difference between the two is the private sector performs drug tests for economic and liability purposes. So the ramifications of private sector drug testing doesn't have long-term effects on the individual other than possibly hindering them from being employed or losing their job. In the private sector, there are more extensive social and personal impacts on the individual. For example, in the state of Florida, if anyone receiving public assistance or not is suspect of and test positive for drugs and they have dependents, they are automatically forced to undergo a Department of Children and Families investigation, which involves often the children being placed in foster care and the parents undergoing a state-paid or state-funded rehabilitation program, as well as state court costs for custody hearings and things of that nature. The idea behind the policy is to reduce or prevent abuse and address drug problems. However, the facts don't support this idea. The National Household Survey of Drug Abuse. According to the National Household Survey of Drug Abuse, less than 20% of those receiving temporary cash assistance reported personal drug use. However, the most common form of substance abuse was alcohol, which is a legal and easily obtainable commodity and wouldn't result in somebody being denied benefits or having their benefits revoked. According to the CASA Works for Families program, additional barriers were measured in regard to 366 cases of those self-reported drug users and included factors such as transportation issues, little work experience, few job skills, and even personal conditions such as mental illness. Of the 366 cases studied, over 90% possessed 6 of the 14 total barriers examined and concluded that it was the multitude of barriers that causes individuals to remain in the welfare system rather than one single barrier such as drug use. As we can see, the statistics intended to support drug testing of welfare recipients does not support its cause. It is then necessary to consider other avenues both to ensure state and federal money is not abused or overextended and the drug problem in America is addressed. As far as a solution, there are already current policies in place that have reduced spending in the welfare system. And for example, the Graham Amendment in 1996 denies funding to individuals convicted of a felony, which directly refutes the common misconception that people on welfare participate in or have participated in criminal activity. Also, the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act, established in 1996, states were granted the ability to determine and implement sanctions on welfare eligibility. Common sanctions including the length of time one is eligible for assistance, differentiating between types of assistance received, and the projected long-term need of assistance on a case-by-case basis, significantly reduced the total number of welfare cases by 59% from 1996 to 2003, all without the implementation of drug testing procedures. These policies that are already in existence can be adjusted and even given more strict regulations that would help save money in the short and long term, as well as address the drug problem in the United States without having welfare recipients or applicants be subject to invasive testing and having their constitutional rights compromised. This policy is a direct infringement on our freedoms that not only impacts our current generation, but has the potential to negatively impact our future generations, which may lead to further invasions of our privacy. For example, if the logic behind this policy and the policies passed and is successful, then this could be applied, the same logic can be applied to other policies, such as having to drug test or have psychological evaluations of minor children in public schools, seeing as how tax dollars pay for public education. And could even go as far as what they did in communist China, where they told you how many children you were allowed to have. Because the more population, the more money the government would have to pay out in order to support them. But would we as Americans be willing to go that far in order to ensure that our tax dollars aren't wasted? In conclusion, I would like to just remind you that this policy is a violation of our Fourth Amendment rights, has been determined as such in every court of law that it's been presented in, with the most recent occurring in Michigan in 2003. The research does not support the argument, and the implications on our future generations are disastrous in regard to our personal freedoms as Americans. Although we may not be directly affected now, have been in the past, and may have no intention of in the future, doesn't mean that if we are, or somebody we know needs to apply for public assistance, that they should be criminalized. We should not judge the poor or lower income individuals as criminals and reinforcing those stereotypes that people of a lower socioeconomic class are deviant. As a single mother, wanting my son to have the same freedoms that he was born with has a personal investment in this argument. For a moment, take the financial aspect out of the equation and consider not only the future ramifications of this policy, but how much of your personal freedoms you would be willing to sacrifice simply because your financial situation, not caused by anything of your own doing or lack thereof, has placed you in the position of seeking additional help.